Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. On this show, I interview top sports entrepreneurs, athletes, and executives who are shaping and many times changing the sports business industry. You can subscribe to our show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our 76 Capital website. Today, my guest on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show is Jim Cavale, the chairman of athletes.org, the Players Association for college athletes that educates, organizes, and represents its members by negotiating the terms of their collegiate athletic experience. Prior to founding athletes.org, Jim was the founder and CEO of Influencer that was acquired by Teamworks. It's so excited to have you on the show. There's so much that's happening across the collegiate landscape. Jim, welcome to our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Wayne, thank you so much for reaching out and making this happen. I'm really excited about the conversation.
Well, so am I. And man, it couldn't be a better time for us to have this conversation. I mean, I really am so excited for you to be able to break it all down for us. You are one of the most foremost experts with all the rules and regulations of college athletics, the lawsuits that have happened over the years, the challenges that have happened this year, now with the House versus NCAA settlement, and now it has been approved. Here we are, but where do we stand, Jim?
Well, it's interesting because, I think the settlement getting approved was a milestone in that the NCAA, the conferences, and the schools put this deal together and really started operating months ago as if the deal was already done. And now it's happened. So they feel like there's some progress. But I think when you go beneath the surface and you start to have conversations in a one-on-one manner with leaders of institutions, I think they know that the House settlement is an incomplete settlement. It's really just a small step forward. And it's going to create a lot more problems and a lot more chaos for the industry before we have a complete solution. So there's a lot of directions I could go with explaining that, but I think that's the high level summary of the settlement in the market.
So let's break it down even a little further on that. I mean, and certainly you can do that, right? I mean, in so, as you said, in so many different ways. But what did the settlement actually do? Let's start there.
Yeah, so the settlement really allows for the school to now pay the athletes directly. That was not allowed before. And that's the main thing that it addresses is compensation from the school, the college athletics program, to the athlete. However, the fine print shows these are still NIL deals that the school is now doing with the athletes instead of collectives doing NIL deals with the athletes. At least that's how this is intended. The goal of this system is to have all of the pay for play that's being disguised as NIL, because that's what it is. It's really pay for play. It's being disguised as NIL because they're scared of calling athletes employees. It's now moving that from the collectives to the schools. Now, will the collective deals continue? We'll get into that in a little bit because I think they will. But the way it works is each school has a cap that they must adhere to with these NIL payments they're making to their college athletes. And that cap starts just over $20 million per year per school. It's a 10-year deal. So each year there'll be escalators that grow that cap. The estimation is that that cap will be over $30 million per year per school 10 years from now. So it's going to evolve and grow as a cap. But that $20 million cap that we're starting with can be divided up by the school any way they want. And most schools will spend the majority of that on football. The next sport they'll invest in will be men's basketball, then women's basketball, and then some of the Olympic sports, or some schools may just do 2 or 3 sports. And so that's really how it's being approached. And these are, once again, NIL deals. And the reason that's important is the coach is selling now to the athlete, hey, come play quarterback here for $1 million. The athlete's signing $1 million NIL deal with the school, thinking they're signing to play quarterback. But the fine print really is all this endorsement language. Like, you have to promote the school in these ways, and you can't do deals with these brands that conflict with sponsors of the school. And we own your likeness for these things. And that's going to create a problem, because when an athlete doesn't play as well and the coach maybe wants him to move on, well, he didn't really violate his publicity rights NIL deal with the school. He just didn't play well at quarterback. Or on the other side, if an athlete plays great and they want to leave and take a bigger offer at another school, they're not really contracted for performance at a school. So it's going to be easy for them to leave an NIL rights deal with one school and go to an NIL rights deal with another school. And so the crux of all the problems that are coming because of the House settlement is in that the leaders in college athletics are still lying by calling pay-for-play deals NIL deals and structuring them as such. And it's a big hole that's going to have a lot of results that are not going to be ones that make people happy, at least not the leaders of these schools.
I mean, you really, it's really interesting what you just said. And I think that because most people think of NIL as they actually have to do something, right? And are the athletes, are they going to have to do something, or they're supposed to do
something?
Well,
in an endorsement NIL setting, there's really two ways you can make money with your name, image, and likeness. There's active use of your name, image, and likeness, and there's passive use of your name, image, and likeness. An example of passive use would be they take your picture on media day and then they use it in a promotional at the bookstore to sell something for your sports program. Well, you took the picture, so I guess there's a little bit of active there, but past that, you weren't a part of anything else. Pretty passive deal. The ultimate passive deal is jersey sales or video games, right? So that's one way. The active aspect of name, image, and likeness is where you have to show up and do something. You have to speak at a dinner. You have to show up at a dinner and make an appearance. You have to sign autographs. You have to be in a commercial shoot, right? Those are more active use deals. Any of those active or passive use deliverables can be a part of these school NIL deals with athletes. Each athlete's negotiating them separately, but ultimately, unless an athlete has a really good agent or lawyer, a lot of them are just signing whatever is put in front of them because they're excited to get this money to play their position on the field or court. And they're going to be surprised when they find out they can't do real NIL endorsement stuff outside of the school deal like they thought they could.
Because of they're locked in now on the deal that they have with the school.
Correct. And so to transition, the goal is that all of the pay for play being disguised as NIL would now come from the schools to the athletes, and the collectives would not be able to do pay for play NIL deals anymore. And the way that they're hoping to execute on that goal is they've created a college sports commission that is basically ran by the Autonomy 4 conferences, the Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC. And they hired a CEO, Brian Seeley from Major League Baseball, who was the chief investigative officer, to be the CEO of this college sports commission. And they contracted with Deloitte to create a fair market value system called NIL GO. And athletes have to report any NIL endorsement deal outside of the school that's $600 or more to this NIL GO system. And the real reason this system has been created is so that if an athlete does a deal with a collective and it looks like a pay for play deal more than a real NIL endorsement, the NIL GO system can say, no, that's not fair market value, and stop the deal. And so here in America, where you and I can sell our house for whatever somebody's willing to pay for it, college athletes are going to be told you cannot sell your name, image, and likeness for whatever somebody's willing to pay for it in these types of settings. And there is an arbitration aspect that it goes to if the athlete wants to fight it. It's a 45-day process, so it happens pretty fast. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they execute on this NIL GO system from the College Sports Commission, because I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits should they not allow deals to go through, or if they find out a deal still went through against their will, they can deem the athlete ineligible. So imagine athletes being ineligible for taking, a six-figure NIL deal outside of what the school is paying them. So there's a huge hole with the NIL GO system. And really, like, if you look at the big picture, okay, this is a multi-billion-dollar sports and entertainment business here in America, right? College sports. And we all know that the majority of the $18 billion of annual revenue college athletics made in 2022, based on the last reporting that's been done, the great majority of that comes from college football. And we know that here in America, college football is the second most popular sport behind the NFL. And it gets outperformed by the NFL by a few $1 billion a year, but it also outperforms the NBA and the MLB when it comes to revenue. So college football is the second most popular sport in America. The only difference between college football and the NFL, MLB, and NBA is they don't collectively bargain the rules. And because of that, there are no rules. And as soon as you try to set rules, there's only going to be more lawsuits. It's all because we don't have a partnership between the players and the schools in a collective bargaining agreement that could establish transfer rules, free agency rules, compensation rules, health and safety standards, eligibility limits, academic standards, et cetera. You could have all that again in college athletics if the college athletes could collectively bargain with the schools. And so we're in this situation where we have a salary cap, $20 million a year. I just said it earlier, but it wasn't collectively bargained. So it's going to be open for litigation. We have a system called NIL GO that's going to regulate performance compensation that's coming outside of the school. But we don't really have rules agreed upon and collectively bargained. So there's going to be lawsuits around that as well. And I could keep going, but that's really what's at the crux of what the House settlement doesn't do, is that we still don't have a true collectively bargained partnership that establishes rules and gives the league, so to speak, of schools that want to do this, the ability to set rules, enforce rules, and not keep getting sued.
And that leads us to why I believe you started athletes.org, because you believe that there needs to be the athletes themselves need to be able to collectively bargain and be able to do exactly like what you said the players do in all those other sports that are out there today.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hit a wall in 2022. I had built Influencer from 2017 to 2020, built it first as a SaaS product for schools to buy to help their athletes on social media with building their brand. And then we sold it to Teamworks in late 2019. I stayed on board as CEO of Influencer post-acquisition, and we built for NIL. We built technology really from a standpoint of fintech to do payments for athletes and reporting for compliance departments to see the deal flow their athletes were doing. And by 2022, we had, a few $100 million of NIL data in our system. And I had a lot of really strong relationships with athletic directors and commissioners that are running conferences in schools and college athletics. And so I would go present to them the data because we had a good data sample. And what I would show them is, 90% of this $300 million is coming from your donors. And they're laundering money through a shell company called a collective to pay your players to play at your school. That's what NIL has become here in 2022. And the reason the first year of NIL has reflected this outcome is because Ed O'Bannon beat you in court about a decade ago. And you didn't do anything to get in front of it and create a system. And so with no system and NIL going live, this is what we have. And in 2022, there were new lawsuits getting started or that had been started. Lawsuits like Hubbard versus the NCAA, Carter versus the NCAA, House versus the NCAA, Johnson versus the NCAA. And I would explain to these different leaders, hey, listen, like these lawsuits are about you paying your athletes directly. And I think you need to figure out a system to do that because this current system is not going to really work. It's a house of cards for a bunch of different reasons. And I would get a lot of pushback when I would make that suggestion. And I felt strongly by the end of 22 that, I had built a good company and Influencer. Teamworks had done a great job of putting it under its umbrella, continuing to grow it. And it was time for me to build really what I believe is the only bridge that will save college athletics. And that's a bridge between the athletes and the schools. And that's what athletes.org was built to be. And I was scared to launch it without having the right team and the right partner. And God blessed me with Brandon Copeland early in 2023. Cope, as I call him, was finishing his 10th year in the NFL, Wharton grad there in Philly, and played at Penn. And as an undrafted free agent, played 10 years in the NFL. And that really is all you have to know about him. That says a lot. But while he played 10 years in the NFL, he was a professor in the offseason at Penn. He built a very successful multifamily real estate business. And he also was a player rep for the NFL Players Association. 3 of his 10 seasons, he voted on the 2020 CBA. And so Cope comes on board and we build out this team of former NCAA, college athletics, pro sports league people that really understood what we wanted to accomplish by building a players association for college athletes to organize so that it could serve as the vehicle for collectively bargaining with whatever the league is of the future. Let's build that now. And since then we've signed up, we're about to hit 5,000 athletes. We're focused in our sign up efforts on college athletes that play power conference football and basketball, because we believe that's who's going to need this first. But we are signing up athletes in every sport at all levels, because really all athletes need a seat at the table to understand how their sport is going to work and agree to it. And so that's what we've built over the last 20 months since we launched it in August of 2023. And a lot's changed. When we launched it, I went from stepping down as CEO over at Influencer and Teamworks beginning of August. End of August, I announced athletes.org. A lot of people who were congratulating me when I stepped down from Teamworks and Influencer were hitting me up saying, what the heck, when I launched athletes.org, because they thought that I was taking an opposing position and coming after them. And that's not what the intention was. The intention always has been build a bridge that can create rules for college athletics with the athletes sitting at the table. And since late 2023, a lot's changed, including this settlement now being approved. And I think a lot of leaders in college athletics coming back to me saying, hey, listen, we believe the only way to solve for college athletics is collective bargaining. Let's talk. Let's evolve our conversations. And that's only happening more and more and more. As recently as this past week in Orlando at NACTA, the Athletic Directors Conference, where I had dozens of one-on-one meetings with Power Conference ADs who want this.
And what are they saying to you?
Well, they're basically, it starts with questions, right? Because one thing that you have to know is what you don't know. And look at me, I'm not a lawyer, right? But I've put a legal team around me led by Jim Quinn. Jim's won every major case for the players against the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL over the last 40 years. Jeffrey Kessler worked under Jim for a couple decades, right? So we got Jim and this team. And so everything I'm saying has come from putting really, really smart people around myself to help me understand these things. And now I'm passing that on to a lot of these athletic directors. And so one of the questions I get is like, well, like, who are they negotiating with? Are they negotiating with us, the school? Because like, we're in a right to work state and our governor does not like unionization. Like, how's that going to work? And so what we do is we explain, we say, listen, it's very simple, actually. Okay. There has to be a vehicle for the athletes to negotiate. That's what we've built. And there has to be a vehicle for the schools to negotiate. You have to go build that, whether that's your conference, whether that's this new college sports commission over the Autonomy 4 conferences, whether it's 2 conferences who want to do it. I don't know, but you guys need your vehicle. We've built the athletes' vehicle. And then from there, the rules are in the middle that the 2 vehicles negotiate. And the athletes are not collectively bargaining with your school. The Atlanta Falcons players do not collectively bargain with the Atlanta Falcons. They collectively bargain with the NFL, that league entity. So there are no right to work state issues. And if you want to take it further, ask a governor in a state where it's a right to work state and they don't like unionization. Let's just say Florida. Ask Ron DeSantis if he has a problem with the Miami Dolphins collectively bargaining. No, he doesn't, because the Miami Dolphins players collectively bargain with the NFL. It would be the same thing for Florida State, Florida, Miami, FAU, Florida International, UCF, and everybody else in Florida. It would be a central entity they'd be collectively bargaining with. So you start to demyth these things that they've heard from their president, from commissioners, from people who don't want to have this conversation. And then the next thing you do is you ask the athletic director, if we don't collectively bargain, what is the other option? And it's clear that the only other option is Congress helping you with not a bipartisan bill, but a clear Republican Party bill that's not going to get the votes. And Congress also has a lot of more important things to deal with. And they're showing that with how they've looked at college athletics time after time after time, every time they've been asked for help. And so those are the only 2 choices here. Fans that are watching, like, if you don't like the lack of structure with the transfer portal and the fact there's no transfer rules, if you don't like the fact that you don't know what players really make and there's no transparency around player salaries because we're lying and calling them NIL deals instead, like, the only way to correct this is collective bargaining. And that's why you love the NFL. And that's why it has such parity with single-digit spreads and fantasy football and viewership that nobody's ever seen before, because it has that. So this is the direction that they've got to figure out. And I help athletic directors understand that when we talk.
Well, certainly. I mean, one of the things we always talk about at 76 Capital, and you were saying this earlier, I mean, with college football being the number 2 sport that people watch, right? It's also the number 2 sport that is bet on, and number 3 sport is college basketball. So you have this sort of farce, as I'll say, that it's not professional sports. It's been professional, for a very long time, and it still is, and it's even more so now. And you have this $20.5 million cap that you talked about earlier, right? but you're reading articles about college football teams that are going to spend 30 and 40 million. So how does that work?
Yeah. So what they've done is they said, oh, we've heard that this settlement might be approved. I'm talking now in Q1 of this year, Q1 2025. Oh, we heard the settlement's going to be approved somewhere in late Q2 2025. So it might not allow for collective deals to happen anymore. And we'll test that later. But for now, let's front load as many deals as we can in recruiting for basketball and football with big collective deals. And we'll also start doing some actual school deals off the $20 million cap. And if the settlement doesn't get approved, we'll just assign those deals to the collective too. But let's basically double the 20 million in the first year, which is only going to inflate what every athlete's getting paid, only making it harder to renegotiate with them next year. And that's what they've done, is they've front loaded these deals. What I think happens though, is I think these collective deals continue. I've talked to many athletes who basically are saying, hey, listen, I've got a school NIL deal already, and it's for this amount for these services. I'm going to do an identical deal with the collective NIL deal, just like the school deal, for this amount and these deliverables. And I'm going to submit it to the NIL GO system. And if they say that this deal can't go through, my comp, when I go into arbitration, is my school deal. And I'm looking forward to fighting it. Talk to other athletes who are like, I'm just not going to submit anything. How will they know? So like, that's where we're at. Right. And so, I mean, it's something that we have to face, and we need leaders. Leadership's hard, right? Like if leadership were easy, just like anything else is great, everyone would do it. Leadership's hard. And there's going to be moments in time where leaders have to do unpopular things, right? My favorite leadership example in college sports history happened 5 years ago when Greg Sankey saw the Big Ten and the Pac-12 cancel their football seasons in the middle of the summer of 2020 due to COVID and these doctor theories of myocarditis killing football players. Greg Sankey said, listen, we got a plan. We're going to start the season on September 27th. That's been the plan for months now. We're going to stay with the plan and keep doing research. We're not going to cancel the season. And then the Big 12 and the ACC kind of hung on to that and followed suit. And later, who ended up playing? The Big Ten. Matter of fact, one of their teams made it to the national championship that year, Ohio State. They lost to Alabama. And that saved college football in 2020 and a ton of revenue for a lot of schools, okay? It was an unpopular decision. It was leadership. And I commend Commissioner Sankey for that leadership. We need that same leadership here. We need to stop calling NIL deals. They're not. They're performance deals. We have to tell the truth on that. We need to structure them as such. And then we need to stop asking Congress for help that they're never going to provide and just continue to wait and sink on a ship when we could build a beautiful ship and build a bridge to walk across, and everyone will have it better. Fans, athletes, schools, there'll be more money. I really believe that this is going to save the industry, not hurt it. And, you know, I think more and more people in private are believing that. And we've seen a couple athletic directors from power conference schools go public, one in the SEC, one in the ACC, saying we need collective bargaining. I think you're going to see that grow as well.
Well, you know, one of the things that a lot of people ask me and my partners here at 76 Capital, well, what about all those other sports? You know, the Olympic sports, what's going to happen here? I mean, does any of the 20.5 million go to any of those athletes? You know, what about Title IX? I know these are the questions that no one really has the exact answer for, but what do you think is going to happen with all that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think here, first of all, when you get outside of the power conferences, what you've got to realize is group of 5 schools and below, FCS, Division II, Division III, they're not going to do much revenue sharing, if at all. Group of 5 will do some. They ain't going to do 20 million per year, but they might do some. FCS will probably do very little to none. D2 will do, I don't think, any. Okay. And they will operate as is. They're still going to have all their sports. They're not losing any money because they're not coming up with $20 million a year. What you really need to think about when you ask that question about the Olympic sports is the power conference schools, because all of them are coming up with $20 million new dollars per year. Even Ohio State, who led the way last year with over $300 million of gross revenue, lost $30 million. They had negative EBITDA, right? So everybody's outspending whatever they make. And now you're asking them to add 20 million new dollars in expenses on this rev share. And so they're all going to struggle. And I think that you're going to see most of them, not all of them, but most of them go to the institution to ask for the 20 million. And these are institutions that are getting less funding from the federal government because of the change in power and the new dynamics with that. And now they're going to be asked, while they're getting less federal funding, to give 20 million more dollars to athletics to fund talent. I think all of them will at the power conference level in the first year, which is this year. But not all of them are going to win. A lot of them are going to lose. More than half of them are going to have losing seasons. And then they're going to go back to the institution again next year and say, need 20 million again. And there's going to be a drop off year after year on who's going to be fully funding this rev share. I really believe that. There's also going to be schools that look at this and say, we're going to have to cut sports because as a power conference school that's got to spend $20 million on our football and basketball athletes to get them here and have talent to win and sell tickets and generate revenue and still be a part of this conference with this media deal, we're going to cut a few sports. And, I don't think it's going to happen as widespread as people think. I think it's more likely to happen in a school that has 30 sports, like North Carolina, who almost has 30 sports, or in Ohio State, who has more than 30 sports, than it is an SEC school. SEC schools average less than 20 sports per school, but schools that have a lot of sports, you may see some cuts. But let's really look. Let's dive in a little bit deeper on these other sports. They've been dragged along with conference realignment. For Oregon to still have track and field, which they'll always have because it's Oregon, they've got to now send track and field to Rutgers for a meet. Some are only running I'll quote my friend Drew Weatherford, a 10-second, 100. And they travel across the country to do it, to run for 10 seconds, right? Like, we are dragging West Coast teams like Cal and Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA all the way across the country to play these other schools just because of football. Football's dragged them into this. If we had more regional scheduling for Olympic sports, costs would go down significantly from that travel being decreased. We've also created a standard with the way we're investing into these sports, the level of facilities, the living conditions, the uniforms, the unlimited shoes. Got to look at all these expenses. The sport should still exist. There needs to be a definition of the standard level of play. And I think athletes need to agree to that definition. Matter of fact, last year, around this time, I went to Notre Dame and I sat down with my partner, Brandon Copeland, a few people from our team, and we had athletes from all the different sports at Notre Dame in one room. We talked about all these issues. And what was interesting was the men's cross country runner and the women's soccer athlete and the other sports, non-football, non-basketball, they were fine with football players and basketball players getting all of the 20 million, as long as they knew their sport was still going to exist at a certain level. That's what they cared about. And I think that's what most Olympic sport athletes and women athletes care about, is they want to know their sport is still going to exist to a certain level. And I think in exchange for that, they would agree to not getting the rev share of 20 million, knowing that football doing well and men's basketball doing well and women's basketball doing well creates ticket sales and media opportunities and other things that generate revenue to help fund their sport to exist.
Well, I mean, I remember you telling me that story when we were at the Final Four about, when you brought all the athletes together and really what they want. And as you said, that question of what do the athletes want and what they're and what they need and how, quite frankly, how they feel, that's really not ever discussed in any of this. It's sort of just, it's coming down from the top, but the top is sort of this amorphous top, as you said, without a real leader or leadership. And now these rules are here and here we go. So anyway, Jim,
yep.
Look, I have to mention, I'm looking over your shoulder, and you have Now It's Legal is your podcast that you do. Tell us about that and some of the guests that you've had and some of the things that you are looking forward to, who you're looking forward to talk to this year.
Well, Now It's Legal is what NIL really stands for. So NIL has been going on, as we know, for decades and decades under the table, and now it's just legal for folks to do it in public. So that's why the name of the podcast is Now It's Legal. And it's really a podcast about the past, present, and future of college athletics. So we interview everyone from, athletes to like Sedona Prince, who's the plaintiff in the House case, for an example, played women's basketball at TCU, to authors like Armin Katanian and John Talty, who I just interviewed about their wonderful book, The Price, which is an investigative book about the first 3 years of NIL. Everybody should read it. To, athletic directors and coaches. This season we're coming out with right now, we're going to have 5 different college basketball coaches talking about what it's like building a program in this current era. Jay Billis, a broadcaster, is a great episode as well. Tommy Tuberville, U.S. Senator, a Republican senator who's for collective bargaining for college athletes, former coach, right? So a lot of different perspectives on these key issues we talked about in this conversation. And, it's definitely resonated with leaders at the institutions in college athletics, which is really who we created it for.
Yeah, I saw your friend Josh Pastner last week in Las Vegas, and he and his new staff out there. I mean, they're getting ready. They're waiting for their kids to come in, right? They were just put their roster together. I mean, it's phenomenal to see, and it's just so different, I guess, as to what's happening now. And as you said, this is the year where schools are going to be paying students for student athletes for the first time directly. It's really going to be amazing.
It is. It's a wild time, and a lot of history is going to be written in the next few years based on how this goes.
So as we wind down this episode of our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show, and again, Jim, it's been awesome having you on the show. I mean, we could talk for hours, and I love learning, the history from you and how we've gotten to where we are today and what you're thinking. But, how do you think this year is going to go? What are there any types of things that you think are going to sort of, will there be like a situation like I just mentioned UNLV, but like the UNLV quarterback, will there be a situation like that with someone just leaving because they're not getting paid or they don't like what they're getting paid? Or there's a couple of things that you're looking for that potentially could happen over the next several months or so?
Yeah, I think first off, you're going to see athlete power grow. And I think the way you're going to see it grow is athletes are going to hold out. Athletes are going to push back on a contract not being approved by this clearinghouse. And they're going to be able to, because they're signing NIL deals with their school. So if they want to leave, they can. There are no transfer rules. The transfer portal is a myth. There is no set time you can or cannot transfer. You can technically enroll or unenroll at a school anytime you want. And that combined with this lack of a system we have for compensation is going to mix together to create, I think, more holdouts. And I think you'll see holdouts happen during the fall. And I think they'll continue to happen in the future beyond that. Second thing is you're going to see power continue to decrease from the schools because there's going to be more lawsuits around these contracts, what was promised, what was understood, what happened, lawsuits around getting pushed into the portal, but you're still under contract and you want your money. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits. The difference is it won't be House versus the NCAA, Alston versus the NCAA, O'Bannon versus the NCAA. It'll be player versus the school. The lawsuits are all coming to the school now. That's one thing that's genius by the NCAA and the settlement is they've passed the liability down to the school, and you're going to see coaches named along with schools in lawsuits starting later this year and beyond. So it's going to be really interesting. I think those are the two big things, though. There's going to be lawsuits against the schools and even the coaches, and there's going to be holdouts by athletes that are going to only be a magnification of what we've seen already with Sluka or Nico or whatever example you want to use.
Absolutely. Well, again, Jim Cavale, chairman of athletes.org, has been, it's been great having you on the show. So how can people follow you and keep in touch with you and watch Now It's Legal or listen to it? And what's the best way for people to stay in touch with you?
Well, with the pod, just search Now It's Legal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or YouTube, and you can subscribe right there. You can also follow Now It's Legal Pod on Instagram and get clips of new episodes. For me, it's just my name, Jim Cavale. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, pretty active on those platforms, and always happy to connect.
Well, again, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to see what happens this season, and hopefully it's a great season for everybody, and hopefully at some point we figure this all out, and you guys are right in the middle of it all. So good luck with everything, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate you having me.
On behalf of the entire 76 Capital team, thank you for joining us for this edition of our Sports Leadership Show. Please remember to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast network or on the 76 Capital website. You can also explore the hundreds of episodes we've produced over the past several years on those same networks. And as always, go out there and make it happen.